Julia Fiona Roberts was born in Smyrna, Georgia in 1967. Her parents, Walter and Betty Lou, were dreamers, actors who built the first integrated acting school in their small southern town. Their courage earned them praise, even from Martin Luther King Jr., but inside their home, love was slipping away. Money vanished faster than hope, and nights filled with argument replaced laughter. When Julia was only 4, her parents divorced, shattering the only world she knew. Her father, once her anchor, drifted away. Her mother's remarriage brought even more chaos. Julia, her brother Eric, and sister Lisa grew up in a house of shouting, slammed doors, and fear. She learned to move quietly, speak softly, and hide. The stutter that tangled her words mirrored the tremor in her life. Then, at 10, came her first heartbreak, her father's death from throat cancer. He left behind cassette tapes of bedtime stories. Alone in the dark, Julia played them again and again, listening to his voice until the tape broke, as if breaking meant he would finally stay. At school, she was mocked for her phony smile, the same smile that would one day define her. Each insult carved deeper into her silence. But instead of bitterness, something extraordinary grew inside her, the need to transform pain into art. Acting became her escape, a way to speak when her voice trembled. By 1985, she left Georgia behind, clutching a small suitcase and the last of her father's memory. New York was cold and indifferent. Her first apartment was a cracked, unheated room where she slept in her coat. Auditions ended in rejection after rejection. She pawned her father's watch to buy food, tears falling on the counter as if saying goodbye twice. Yet she never quit. Every no was fuel. Her first small break came with a Clairol commercial, a fleeting smile that earned her a union card and a glimpse of possibility. That moment, insignificant to others, was the start of everything. A single spark in a city of shadows. Julia's first acting roles came quietly. Tiny appearances, brief lines, but each one carried the weight of a lifetime's dream. On the set of Crime Story in 1987, feverish and shivering, she stood before the camera, determined. A smoke effect burned her skin, leaving small scars, marks that mirrored the invisible wounds she'd carried since childhood. She didn't flinch. Her resilience hardened. Then Mystic Pizza arrived in 1988, a small film that became her first real breakthrough. Critics noticed her, calling her a beauty with fierce energy. 1 year later came Steel Magnolias, and she poured all her sorrow into Shelby, a young woman battling illness. On set, she cried alone, doubted herself, but transformed her tears into gold. At 22, she won a Golden Globe and her first Oscar nomination. Those childhood scars, the loneliness, the hunger, they had become her superpower. Hollywood had found its newest star, but Julia had found something greater: purpose. Then came 1990 and Pretty Woman. The film that wasn't supposed to succeed became a legend. Julia, an unknown girl in cheap shoes, turned Vivian Ward into an icon. Her smile, once mocked, now lit the entire world. The moment she handed Richard Gere a note saying, "Please say yes," and he did, history was written. Pretty Woman earned hundreds of millions and transformed Julia Roberts into America's sweetheart. Yet fame, like fire, burns those who hold it too long. The pressure was relentless. The cameras never stopped. She could no longer walk the streets without being followed. Everyone adored her. Yet, she felt emptier than ever. "The world loves me," she once said, "but sometimes I feel like I belong to no one." The fairy tale had made her a queen, but a queen in a glass cage. In that golden cage, Julia searched desperately for love. Liam Neeson entered her life, a gentle, grounding soul who offered peace amid the noise. But like every brief calm in her story, it passed too soon. Next came Dylan McDermott, her co-star and soon fiancé. It seemed like destiny, but Hollywood love rarely survives the spotlight. Paparazzi swarmed and intimacy became spectacle. Within a year, the engagement dissolved. The heartbreak was private, but the humiliation was public. Julia, who could enchant millions on screen, was quietly losing faith in love. Her characters glowed with passion, yet behind the scenes, she was learning that love under the flash of fame often fades faster than it blooms. Still, she pressed forward, burying her pain in work, one performance after another, each mirroring her private grief. Then came the story that stunned the world, the wedding that never was. Kiefer Sutherland and Julia Roberts, Hollywood's golden couple, planned a wedding so grand it was dubbed the event of the century. Invitations were printed, flowers arranged, photographers poised. But as the day approached, Julia's silence grew heavier. She smiled through fittings, but her eyes carried distance. Rumors of Kiefer's infidelity and late-night escapades began swirling. The love that once felt destined now felt uncertain. And then 3 days before the ceremony, she walked away. The dress hung untouched. The aisle remained empty. Hollywood exploded with headlines. But Julia said nothing. In that silence was power. Years later, Kiefer admitted she was braver. She chose truth over illusion. That canceled wedding wasn't her downfall. It was her awakening. Heartbreak became her rebirth. After walking away from Kiefer, Julia poured herself into Sleeping with the Enemy, a haunting portrayal of a woman escaping abuse. The performance was so raw that audiences felt her pain as if it were their own. She followed it with Dying Young, where love and loss intertwined once more. Each role wasn't an act. It was therapy. Memory transformed into art. The wedding that never happened turned her vulnerability into mastery. Hollywood saw scandal. Julia saw survival. The bride who left the altar became a phoenix. Every frame she appeared in carried the quiet defiance of someone who had chosen herself over pretense. For the first time, her strength wasn't about beauty. It was about boundaries. She had walked away from the fairy tale to write her own story. In 1993, Julia shocked the world again, not with a blockbuster, but with a wedding no one saw coming. She married country singer Lyle Lovett in a small Indiana church, wearing a simple white dress. No diamonds, no cameras, just two people chasing peace. For a brief moment, she believed she'd found it. But fame is rarely kind to sincerity. The marriage, though tender, faded within 2 years. There were no public fights, only quiet distance. They parted gracefully, understanding that not all love is meant to last. For Julia, this wasn't failure. It was another lesson, that sometimes love's purpose is to teach us when to let go. She didn't grow bitter. She grew wiser. That chapter closed softly without noise, leaving her stronger, steadier, and more certain of who she was. By the mid-1990s, Julia Roberts stood at the height of fame, yet felt profoundly alone. She once confessed, "I have everything, yet nowhere to come home to." Her romantic life was a revolving door of heartbreaks. Her professional life a dizzying climb. She sought comfort not in parties or premieres, but in quiet reflection. Then fate intervened. On the set of The Mexican in 2000, she met Daniel Moder, a cinematographer, not a celebrity. Calm, grounded, unseen. While the world chased her image, he saw the person behind it. Their connection was instant, yet unhurried. Rumors erupted. Tabloids screamed scandal. But Julia and Daniel said nothing. In a world addicted to noise, their silence became sacred. What began behind the camera turned into the love story she had always searched for. 2 years later, on July 4th, 2002, Julia Roberts, the same woman who had once fled a grand wedding, finally said, "I do." This time, there were no reporters, no gowns glittering under chandeliers, only wildflowers and open skies on her New Mexico ranch. She wore simplicity like grace, whispering her vows to Daniel Moder. That day wasn't about fame. It was about freedom. Together, they built a life of balance and authenticity. When their twins, Hazel and Phineas, arrived in 2004, followed by Henry in 2007, Julia's world shifted forever. "The title I'm most proud of isn't actress, it's mother," she said. The woman once chased by cameras now found joy in morning sunlight and family laughter. She no longer needed